Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, politicians in the United States are calling for a key vote on President Trump's Supreme Court nominee to be delayed after an allegation of sexual assault emerged. Judge Brett Kavanaugh has denied the accusation by Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who says he assaulted her when they were both teenagers. They've both said they're willing to testify before Congress. Our correspondent, Kylie Morris, is in Washington now. Kylie.
John, well, what a difference 48 hours makes. Until the weekend, the nomination process to appoint Brett Kavanaugh, a judge with a perfect conservative pedigree to the Supreme Court, had pretty much been on track, with a lot of fanfare from the White House, a degree of resistance, as you'd expect from the Democrats, but most Republicans I spoke to were feeling confident. But now, these allegations from Dr. Ford, motivated by what she calls her civic duty to come out and speak about them, threaten to pull the rug from under the feet of the judge, the president and the Republican Party. And the members, as you mentioned, of the all-important Senate Judiciary Committee, they were due to vote tomorrow, but now it seems instead more likely they'll hold another hearing, likely featuring those allegations from Dr. Ford and the defense of Judge Kavanaugh.
Something that Democrats are asking for.
In the partisan warfare that passes for politics these days in Washington, the battle over the judge President Trump wants to appoint to the Supreme Court began as you might expect. Judge Brett Kavanaugh front and centre, feisty Democrats railing against the process,
and that's why this system is rigged.
And offended Republicans determined to get their man through and reshape the future of the highest court in the land.
This is the first confirmation hearing for a Supreme Court justice I've seen, basically, according to mob rule.
Judge, the podium is yours.
For President Trump, the appointment of another conservative judge to the Supreme Court bench is a victory for him, his voters and the Republican Party, and all was going to plan. But then, the allegations against Judge Kavanaugh surfaced from Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, a professor from California who alleges that while they were in high school when she was 15 and he was 17, he tried to sexually assault her, an accusation he denies.
While his friend watched, she said, Kavanaugh pinned her to a bed on her back and groped her over her clothes, grinding his body against hers and clumsily attempting to pull off her one-piece bathing suit and the clothing she wore over it. When she tried to scream, she said, he put his hand over her mouth. I thought he might inadvertently kill me, said Ford. He was trying to attack me and remove my clothing.
Initially, Dr. Ford made her allegations anonymously to senior Democrat Dianne Feinstein and the Washington Post. But by the weekend, her identity was no longer secret. Now, her lawyer says she'll testify to the Justice Committee.
She is. She's willing to do whatever it takes to get her story forth, yes. She has taken a polygraph. She's a credible person. These are serious allegations, and they should be addressed. Yeah.
Judge Kavanaugh has issued a statement today denying all allegations against him. But the White House, presumably to keep the process on track, says Dr. Ford should be heard.
Let me make very clear on behalf of the President, with whom I've spoken at length about this, she should not be ignored or insulted. She should be heard. That could be done tomorrow so that we can proceed forward.
The Supreme Court has the power to decide some of the most contentious issues in American life, from abortion to gay marriage, political spending limits and gun rights. Now, in the recent past, its justices have combined in their judgments to cancel out or balance out one another's views. But President Trump campaigned on the promise that he would stack the bench with conservatives so they might automatically undo key legal precedents like Roe versus Wade, the case that legalized abortion. Now, if Kavanaugh is confirmed, he'll become the second most conservative justice on the bench after Clarence Thomas, whose nomination battle back in 1991 reverberates still.
The whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
At his nomination, Professor Anita Hill gave evidence that when she worked with Judge Thomas, she endured relentless, repeated sexual harassment.
My working relationship became even more strained when Judge Thomas began to use work situations to discuss sex.
But Justice Thomas denied her testimony and prevailed to become the longest-serving member on the current bench. The question this time for Conservatives considering Judge Kavanaugh is whether they again give preference to professional pedigree over a woman's word. The 53-year-old judge has a solid Conservative background. After clerking for Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy in the early 1990s, Kavanaugh went on to work for Ken Starr, the independent counsel who investigated Bill Clinton. Kavanaugh helped to write the report that said that the president's affair with Monica Lewinsky was grounds for his impeachment. He was then closely tied to the George W. Bush administration, forming part of his legal team in the 2000 Florida recount before becoming a staff secretary. President Bush then chose Kavanaugh for the D.C. Court of Appeals, where he served for the last 12 years. His accuser, Dr. Ford, says she's made her allegations against him public since she feels her civic responsibility outweighs her anguish over possible retaliation.
You know, there are going to be Republican operatives all over the country who are digging in to her story, who are digging into her family, who I'm sure will try and find any evidence of wrongdoing that she's ever done throughout the course of her entire life.
With reports the committee will hear testimony from Dr. Ford within days, Judge Kavanaugh says he's willing to testify again to defend his integrity. So I'm joined now live by Evan Siegfried from New York. He's a Republican strategist who, as I understand it, Evan, your position on Kavanaugh seems to be evolving. What should happen now?
Well, when I first heard about these allegations, it was dealing with an anonymous accusation in a letter which Senator Feinstein from California didn't even share with the committee or raise with Kavanaugh. And then we had to hear who this person was that was making these accusations because they were anonymous. And yesterday, after reading the Washington Post's interview with her and her side of the story, I became more and more unsettled with what I was hearing. And I've been a staunch defender of Judge Kavanaugh and believe that his resume qualifies him for the Supreme Court. However, after reading that Washington Post story and really doing some soul searching, I can no longer support that nomination and believe he should withdraw. It's for the integrity of the court itself and its future rulings. He will be tainted with this for the rest of his life, even if he is confirmed by the Senate. And it's going to be confirmed along party lines if he's confirmed at all. And we cannot have the integrity of the rulings of the Supreme Court.
It's probably important for our viewers to understand it is a lifetime position, isn't it? So if Brett Kavanaugh were to be confirmed, he has this job for the rest of his life. He'll be making decisions on these critical issues for Americans every year on until he actually dies. So this is why this is so critical at this stage.
It's vital. And there are plenty of other conservative judges across the country that President Trump could nominate who would have the same positions as Judge Kavanaugh, or even further to the right or to the left if the president sought to go that way as a curveball for the rest of us. But Judge Kavanaugh will be tainted by this. We saw this happen 27 years ago with Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill. And to this day, a portion of Americans say Clarence Thomas's validity on the Supreme Court and anything he says or does in his rulings should not be considered because he sexually harassed Anita Hill. And yes, this deals with when Judge Kavanaugh was 17. We might never know the truth of what happened that night and who's actually telling the truth and who is not. But this is so serious, and it is not some sort of stunt pulled by Dr. Ford that I really do not feel comfortable proceeding forward with Judge Kavanaugh. And I should further point out that
can I just say we're hearing from the White House. We're hearing from the White House that they are saying, Kellyanne Conway has come out and said it is very important that Dr. Ford is heard. Chuck Grassley, who's the chairman of the committee, is saying it's very important that she is heard. Are you surprised by that? Are you pleased by this official response?
I am very pleased by that official response. However, the pragmatist in me realizes that if we had not allowed Dr. Ford to come forward and be heard, we would, A, be really kicking women and saying, we don't believe your accusations. We have gone through with the Me Too era a real sense in this country that we should hear accusers. And there was also this cynical bet within the Republican Party that we would hear, or we would offer the chance for her to speak, but she would not speak in front of the Senate. The original offer was she comes and testifies tomorrow, and then Wednesday, Judge Kavanaugh, would be able to rebut it, and on Thursday the committee would vote as to whether or not to send the nomination to the full Senate, and to try and rush this through as quickly as possible, because the longer this nomination plays out, the worse it is for Brett Kavanaugh, as the public's opinion of him will turn, and very sharply.
Evan Siegfried in New York, thank you very much.
Well, President Trump has again declared his confidence in the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh for a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. Mr. Kavanaugh has faced historic allegations of physical and sexual assault, which he's denied. But 3 Republican senators have now joined the Democrats in calling for a key vote on the nomination to be delayed. Our North America editor, John Sopel, takes up the story.
Brett Kavanaugh, until last week, was gliding effortlessly to his seat on the all-powerful Supreme Court. Conservative, charming, popular and well-connected, he seemed the perfect pick to fill the vacant seat.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give...
But now a woman's come forward, a psychology professor from California, to say that she was sexually assaulted by Mr. Kavanaugh when they were teenagers some 35 years ago. Christine Blasey Ford told the Washington Post that she'd been pinned down on a bed by him and that he'd covered her mouth when she tried to scream. "I thought he might inadvertently kill me," she said. Her lawyer says she'll do whatever's necessary.
She is willing to hopefully tell her story in a manner that is a fair proceeding.
Judge Kavanaugh has issued a statement emphatically denying the charge. "This is a completely false allegation," he says. "I have never done anything like what the accuser describes to her or to anyone." The White House is still pushing his nomination, but they'll be watching anxiously in case anything else emerges.
Judge Kavanaugh is one of the finest people that I've ever known. He's an outstanding intellect, an outstanding judge, respected by everybody. Never had even a little blemish on his record. I want him to go in at the absolute highest level. And I think to do that, you have to go through this. If it takes a little delay, it'll take a little delay.
We've been here before. When Clarence Thomas was nominated by George H.W. Bush to the Supreme Court in 1991, he seemed a shoo-in until one of his colleagues, Anita Hill, came forward to testify that she'd been sexually assaulted by him.
Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess.
In the end, Mr. Thomas was confirmed and still sits on the Supreme Court. But this is 2018, and Me Too. The White House and Republican leadership have some delicate judgments to make. Elected politicians may come and go, but a Supreme Court justice is for life. And for Republicans, the dream of a clear Conservative majority on the court is almost within touching distance. The chances are that Brett Kavanaugh will still be confirmed, but everything is now fluid. And if he does fall by the wayside, that will be a blow for Donald Trump as well. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
One of the crucial ways President Trump can make his impact on America is through the Supreme Court, responsible for ruling on what are often the decisions that set the country's moral compass. But his favoured candidate for the empty seat is in jeopardy. Judge Brett Kavanaugh, a known conservative, has been accused of physical and sexual harassment by a professor of psychology, Christine Blasey Ford. She's written to Senator Dianne Feinstein detailing the alleged assault back in the early 1980s when Kavanaugh and Blasey Ford were at high school. Both have said they're willing to testify in front of a Senate Judiciary Committee, and the controversy could lead to the postponement or even cancellation of Judge Kavanaugh's appointment, which would be a major blow to the president. 9 men and women. Together they make up the judges of the US Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. With 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats, Brett Kavanaugh could have the final say on issues that affect the American Constitution. Refugees are welcome. This year, the court has already ruled on contentious issues such as the Trump travel ban, trade union fees, and gerrymandering. The previous judge, Justice Kennedy, despite being appointed by Ronald Reagan, sided with both conservative and liberal justices on major cases. It's unlikely that Brett Kavanaugh would be so collegiate. As a lawyer, he took a lead role in drafting the Starr report, that eventually led to President Clinton's impeachment. He is a capital C conservative, and campaigners are worried that his tipping the vote could see the tightening of abortion laws and the blocking to attempts to restrict gun ownership. That's why this weekend's allegations matter and why the pushback from the president's spokeswoman is so strong.
He's already testified for over 24 hours. I think we're up to closer to 30 hours, he and others, including women right, left, and center ideologically who support him, who have testified as to his character integrity, his judicial temperament, his qualifications. He obviously has gone through 6 FBI vets, which are very thorough, I can assure you.
Professor Blasey Ford said it was their civic duty to speak out. Brett Kavanaugh has denied the allegations, but it may impact the decision by the Senate Judiciary Committee on whether his nomination goes forward to the full Senate. Well, tonight, President Trump signaled that he would back a proposed hearing on the allegations against Judge Kavanaugh, but still praised his pick for the bench.
Judge Kavanaugh is one of the finest people that I've ever known. He's an outstanding intellect, an outstanding judge, respected by everybody. Never had even a little blemish on his record. The FBI has, I think, gone through a process 6 times with him over the years where he went to higher and higher positions. He is somebody very special. At the same time, we want to go through a process. We want to make sure everything is perfect, everything is just right.
But with even the president saying that a little delay may be needed on the upcoming Senate Judiciary Committee vote to endorse Judge Brett Kavanaugh, how did these revelations come about? A short while ago, I spoke to Emma Brown, the investigative journalist who broke the story for the Washington Post. I began by asking her what she made of the testimony of Professor Ford.
Well, she first came to the Washington Post in early July through a tip line, and she came to us before Brett Kavanaugh was named Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court. He was on the short list at the time. So I think that timing is important. She came to us anonymously. She did not want to use her name at the time. She just wanted someone to know what she said had happened to her. And you know, over the course of the summer, she really struggled with what she was going to do with her story. And by the end of August, she had concluded that she would not come forward because she thought it would come at a terrible cost to herself and her family personally, and would not make a difference. That calculation has changed in the last week, you know, as her story started leaking out, and that's why she made a decision to come forward.
I mean, some of the accusations leveled at her is that this is politically motivated.
Our story discloses very candidly that she's a Democrat, that she has made some donations to liberal causes and party politics. So, you know, I think that readers can judge for themselves when they take all the facts that we've presented into account, how much politics may or may not play a role in what she's doing.
And indeed, tonight President Trump has said it has got to be a due process that follows this. Essentially, what will that mean? Because this week, Brett Kavanaugh, of course, was due to appear in front of the Senate Judicial Committee on Thursday. So how do you think this will play out this week?
Well, the Senate Judiciary Committee, as you say, was scheduled to vote on his, report his nomination out to the full Senate this week. This could slow that down. It seems unlikely that they would be able to have a full airing of all of this. I think it's a very polarized country right now and a very polarized response to this accusation. You know, there are people who are supporting her and there are people who are criticizing her and trying to find reasons to undermine her credibility. So I think it's a very polarized response. But we are seeing some Republicans say that she needs to be heard in order to fully resolve this before a vote.
If, as a result of this, Brett Kavanaugh does not reach the Supreme Court, what will it actually mean for the Supreme Court, do you think?
I mean, I think it will mean that for a time there's going to be an 8-person court for a longer period of time than anybody thought up until last week. Which, you know, and beyond that, it's hard to say. Of course, this is all very tied up in politics, in the midterm elections that are approaching here. So I just, you know, I don't want to hazard a guess.
But it's going to be 4 and 4.
Right. I mean, if there's an 8-person court, then for a time there will be a court that doesn't have a deciding vote between what's seen as the conservative and the liberal blocs. And so, that happened not so long ago, of course, when Justice Scalia died and there was an 8-person court, and some important decisions came before the court that they had to, that they were basically tied on. So that could happen again.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Emma Brown.
Thank you for having me.